Yeah. As I was taking notes over the testimony, Mr. Daniel, I think I'd come to you first. I noticed both you and Mr. Alperovich focused on something that seemed instinctively accurate to me as a layperson. That you said it, I think, that we can't keep the adversary out of networks, and that instead we need to thwart their objectives. And it does seem to me that government and private enterprise have spent inordinate resources to keep people out of networks, and so it makes sense to me to finally come to the conclusion that you can't. But what does that mean? Mr. Alperovich, I'll come to him in a minute, because he talked about maybe substituting speed metrics, I believe, to find and eject intruders. I think there might be problems with that idea too. But how do you thwart their objectives, Mr. Daniel?
Well, so what I mean by that is that the adversary is gaining access to networks for a purpose. They're not simply gaining access to gain access. They're looking to steal information. They're looking to steal money. They're looking to do damage. They're looking to cause disruption. They're looking to achieve some objective. And so if you change your mindset to one of, I want to look at all of the different actions that the adversary has to do to achieve that objective, look at all of the different steps that they've got to get through to achieve that end goal, and focus on where do I have the greatest comparative advantage to break that chain, to disrupt their operations. Then suddenly, instead of the defender having to be right all of the time because you're trying to keep the adversary out, the adversary has to be right 100% of the way through their efforts. And so you get many more bites at the apple to try to disrupt them. And so if we start thinking about it in terms of, if we succeed, if they don't get to their end objective. And to my mind, that's a much more effective way to think about cybersecurity.
So again, as a layperson, it seems to me that, for example, when we're worried about avoiding information theft, maybe we ought to think in terms of making a lot more information public so that we're not worried about it being stolen, particularly if it's lower sensitivity. Would that be a possible way to think?
That is certainly one way to think about it. You could also think about storing more of that data in encrypted form, so that even if the adversary gets it, they can't do anything with it.
And if you're concerned about damage being done to data, then you can build in redundancy and have multiple copies of stuff to avoid damage. Would that be another way to go?
That would be another way to go. You try to think of all the different ways that you could thwart what the adversary is doing.
And speaking, Ms. Jackson Lee just made reference to the water system thing. I saw that story, and I wonder, is it necessary that things like that, where you can do damage, why is that connected to the internet? Why can somebody change the way of chemicals put into the water supply over the internet? Would that be a way to defend against the possibility of intrusion if you say networks are not impenetrable, period?
Well, certainly, Representative, it is certainly one of the principles in industrial control systems that you should minimize the number of systems that are connected to the internet. And there are best practices for how to do that in a way that is more secure. But certainly you also want to build in multiple layers of defenses. Like in the case of the water system, they do have them. There are other alarms and things that might have detected that change that was made even after it was made. But I think you raise a good point about really looking at and understanding your network and understanding why you're connecting what you're connecting, and not just assuming that connecting it is a good thing.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Alperovich, you talked about this same issue and said that we need to adopt speed metrics in detecting and ejecting intruders. Doesn't the SolarWinds experience suggest that we might not be really able to do that either?
Well, I think, and thank you for that question, Congressman Bishop. I think SolarWinds operation actually highlights some of the failures, but also some of the successes. I know of a number of major companies that actually detected the intrusion quickly. Palo Alto Networks was one of them, and contained it before any damage was done. So it was certainly possible. Not everyone was successful at doing so, but you do have time. And when I was in the private sector, I coined this concept of breakout time. The time that it takes for an attacker, once they get in, once they establish a beachhead within the network, to actually accomplish the objective, to get off that beachhead, to get to other resources within the network, elevate their privileges, get access to valuable data, ultimately steal that data or destroy it, whatever their objective may have been. And what I found is that on average, it took adversaries from criminal groups over 4 hours to accomplish that objective. That may not seem like a lot, but actually, if the defenders are quick enough to detect, investigate, and remediate breaches within 1 hour, then you can stop them dead on their tracks. They can't get off that beachhead, and you eject them before they're able to be successful. So if we start measuring every agency on their ability to detect, investigate, and remediate breaches quickly, we can start holding them to account and make sure that they're focusing on what truly matters, which is how they become faster than the adversary.
Mr.